God bless everyone. I hope you are having a tremendous week. This is the follow-up video to my solving of the Amy Bradley case. What happened? Where is she? And I have something very interesting that nobody has heard because there's so much conjecture with the sightings in Caribbean islands. I was recently in Trinidad, which you probably heard of Trinidad and Tobago. Most people don't go to Trinidad. It's not touristy. I wasn't there for Amy Bradley. I was there for other reasons. Trinidad is very close to Venezuela. I heard from numerous people who had claimed to have seen Amy Lynn Bradley in Trinidad. And it was brought up very casually. So now is there any evidence or believe that? No. I still stick with she fell off the ship, and she was possibly murdered, that 8%, but most likely fell off the ship. But I thought people would find that interesting because that's such an unexplored, untraveled part of the Caribbean. Nobody goes to Trinidad. If you're a Westerner, you can't go to Venezuela, which I mean the US, Canada, UK. It's very hard to get a visa, especially the US. So just wanted to throw that in there. Thought you'd find that interesting. Okay, I'm going to jump into what still could be done, what should have been done, which would have figured this out. And I'm going to address some main points that no one has mentioned. Of course, Netflix disappeared, that ID channel show, all these different crime shows all over the place on Apple, YouTube, quasi-cable channels, all your streaming networks. Number one, and I addressed this previously, but I'm just going to bring this up and put them together, the seashell factor in Aruba, Curaçao, in that area, which again sounds silly. Can you find good shells all over these islands, or do they get busted up? And I'll give you an example, like Haiti. I know another untraveled island. You can find beautiful, huge shells and take them because they have other issues. They don't care. Most Caribbean islands, St. Martin, the same thing. Except St. Martin, you better not be taking shells out of there. They better not find those when you leave. But Trinidad, Saba, parts of the Bahamas, they're picked over. Just to give you an example, Barbados, a lot of the shells, if there are shells, they're just broken up. There's no prizes. You have to buy them. And that speaks to the current, the ocean, how they get broken up. Now, that is important because this isn't about Amy Lynn Bradley and seashells. It's about if her body falling overboard, and discounting in the Netflix documentary, which everyone is going off of. I think his name is Mentasar. He's the head of law enforcement in Curaçao. When he talks about the bodies always wash up, body parts wash up, even if sharks eat them, I guess sharks are aware enough to, those sharks are kind enough to say, well, I won't eat the whole thing, so something will wash up. That was his statement. And I had stated before, I've been all over the Caribbean, especially these obscure islands, and people who grew up there know the islands that they're from. But they're not oceanographers, they're not biologists, they're not shark experts, they're not maritime experts. So that needs to void that out, because, and I'm going to be pretty much presume that shells get busted up. So when Amy fell, number one, she fell from a long distance. She didn't just fall off a bass boat or a yacht. And number two, the ship's moving. You have a large vessel moving. This is physics, folks. And could have drug her under, could have affected her, because she falls, she hits the water. She doesn't just go in 3 or 4 feet. She slams in there 10 to 30 feet, somewhere around there. And if the inertia from the ship the way it was heading southeast, and they were on the north side of the ship, it would have drug her under or affected, definitely would have caused her to drown. She would have broken things in that fall. She would have been in such shock. She was intoxicated, she was dehydrated, she was tired, which I pointed out before. And another factor is electrolytes, and this is for all you all. I'm not selling anything. In the future I will be, because I'm huge on electrolytes. The reason you're so tired is because of, it's not even you're drinking enough water, you're not getting enough caffeine, or you're not sleeping enough. A lot of you are electrolyte deprived, and it's not just Gatorade. You are missing minerals, and you can be doing everything right, especially in hot climates. And that's another thing. She was dehydrated, she was sunbaked, she was intoxicated, more dehydrated from alcohol and coffee. She was electrolyte starved, her body. So she was not in any state that, she was a great athlete. And again, I always point this out, sweetheart, sweet family, wonderful human being. This is why this hurts everybody, is because we lost a sweetheart of a woman. That's not who we want to lose. We don't want bad people. We lose the good ones and keep the bad ones, which is unfortunate. But she definitely maybe lived a minute to 2 minutes. Her instincts may have kicked in, but she probably fractured a pelvis, or somewhere in her spine, her neck, and she was drug under, and she drowned. And drowning's very painful, very briefly, and then you go into a calm and a peace. So that's most likely somewhere how she went and why she went. And that gets into, then she probably sunk to the bottom. Whatever happened, marine life, we don't know. But why didn't her body wash up? They weren't at port when this happened because of the timing. This happened somewhere between 3:40, probably 3:50 a.m. to 5:50 a.m. And I say that because that is when the brother went to bed. He was done talking to her. She was sick. She was staying on the balcony, and the father claimed he saw her at 5:30, and then she's missing at 5:50. But he saw her legs. We don't have evidence of that. He may be right, but she felt, but they weren't at port yet. They weren't in Curaçao. They were still moving, though they were closer. So the body, as the time went on, the first couple of hours, the body's in the water. It's already beginning to decompose. It's summer. And the water's cool or rather, the water's warm for the rest of the ocean, but it's still cooler than the temperature. So, and it's already going to marine life is going to be curious of what it is, and things are going to begin to fall apart. And I pointed out that clothing, her lighter, whatever she had on, any types of buckles or metal would last. But if it did wash up, nobody on Curaçao or Aruba or Venezuela are sitting there in their, if it washed west to Venezuela, I point that out. Nobody's like, oh, we've been waiting 10 years for Amy Lynn Bradley. They might have thrown it out, kept it, not known. So it's very misleading, this concept. Okay, if you fall in the water and you pass away, you're gonna just wash up. It's easy peasy. No, it doesn't work that way. And the wind in the currents were going to the north, were coming from the northeast, so everything was headed to the west. So they weren't going to hit the island. So it could be, there are so many shipwrecks, human activity, so much going on that if you dropped in a garbage bag or a plastic barrel of some meat with clothes on it to see what would happen, it would probably just get all distributed depending on where you're at. And that goes into, and this was 1998, and how the FBI did what they could. Because remember, once you're 12 miles you're in international waters, once you're 12 miles from a port, So that's another thing, the documentary, and no one has talked about. Number two, what was the FBI's jurisdiction? I mean, how much could they be? They were obviously because it's American citizen, someone could answer this down below. Can they, in that type of situation at sea, can they board the vessel, board a ship or a boat, and have something? They can't arrest people, but because it's American citizen, how much power do they have? No one has addressed that. Or are they at the invitation of the ship, or they were close to they were in Curaçao's water? So why didn't they question why that hasn't been discussed of how much jurisdiction and power they had? Because they said they couldn't arrest. That goes into yellow, and they question him. The lie detector's inconclusive. We've heard this a million times. But did they talk to the waiters, the staff that all had this interest in Amy, or anyone questionable? Or is that just conjecture? Because these are young guys, they're interested in Amy. They probably did that with every attractive young lady, young girl who they were interested in. That doesn't make them traffickers. And there's no talk of them, the FBI questioning them, so they weren't suspicious. There was a comment made that Yellow, if they were in the U.S., he would have been arrested. I remember the female FBI agent said that. I can't remember her last name. She was excellent. Her and the other guy and the male FBI agent were tremendous. They were very good. And I get the vibe, the feeling that at that time, especially the situation, Royal Caribbean, everything, they had their hands tied as to what they could do. And they had limited, because we're thinking, that was 27 years ago. So we're thinking in terms of 2025 CSI, and that's not the case. So that's another thing that goes into 3. Why wasn't Yellow, they couldn't arrest him? Well, then why didn't local Curaçao law enforcement arrest him? Arrest him, hold him, and question him and detain him. I mean, why didn't they? Could they? Could they do it? Try to get more out of him if they think there's something more? I personally don't think. I think ultimately he's been made out to be a boogeyman and escape. I don't think he's a great guy. I don't think he's responsible for. He wasn't trafficking her. If that 8% I mentioned about her life being taken, he probably had something to do with it. But we don't have evidence of that. But they sure, other than the lie detector, which really is meaningless, because there was no court, no hearing, he wasn't detained, and he looks really bad. And that whole waste of time with his daughter on that Netflix documentary that really didn't go anywhere. And that goes, and I'm going to point that out next, about that documentary, which was very entertaining, but they could have had it cut down. We don't need all the friends and family talking about how great Amy was. That's not what we're looking for. They needed to do things like talk about why the cleaning crew wasn't interviewed, and can they still go back now and interview the cleaning crew and ask them, or somehow go back to protocols like that table movement is very important. Do they keep a table by the railing, or do they move it inside? The FBI was, and I believe them, was pretty adamant the table was near the railing. And that would definitely speak to whatever that led to Amy falling, because she either had to throw up, she was taking pictures, she might have been leaning over because to get, when you're that dehydrated, drunk, hungover, that air blowing is really therapeutic. Whatever. That's number one. Can they go back and find that out and talk to and find Royal Caribbean? Like, how did they do that? Or that's never been addressed anywhere. That's never been addressed. I think the neighbor, or rather the guy staying next door that gets ridiculed, and he's odd. He does come off as odd, which is subjective. But they didn't find any evidence of anything. And they mentioned that he had his TV loud and he was talking over it. That doesn't mean anything. That means nothing, zero. The guy was, let's see, he's probably in his 70s now. He's probably in his 40s back then. Amy's, she was like and she was so friendly and sweet that she probably just loved talking to everybody, but I don't think there was any sort of, she was going over there. And he was found not to have any evidence of anything. He might have been doing whatever he was doing that has nothing to do with it. So get him out of there. He didn't do anything. I'm not defending him. And then I'm going to go to the cruise ship director as well, Kurt Deltwiller. I'm not sure of how to say I don't remember his last name. He gets a lot of hate too, which actually I thought he just came off as typically what he is or was. He was a corporate director for a massive, he was no difference in defending Intel, Walmart. He's just doing it for the biggest corporation on the ocean and being paid very well for it, and he had a high up position. So everyone needs, and I'm not validating anyone's concerns or not concerns, but this is an adult woman, a 23-year-old woman. They're not going to make an announcement. They have 2,400 guests. They cannot shut ships down with an adult missing. Unless someone witnessed her fall, her go missing, someone assault her or anything, they're not going to shut that down. That would be mayhem. So he has no control to do that, and he's not going to do that, and he could risk so many issues. 2,400 people. So that just is what it is. There was no control of that, and that to this day goes on. They don't know. Missing is especially within an hour, 30 minutes, she could be, or an adult could be doing whatever. So we'll get that out of the way. Next up is why didn't, or has anyone heard, or why didn't they, and can they do this now, and they should do this now, is experts, humans have been on the ocean for 100,000 years, and since the Ice Age, they've been traveling to different continents. Talk about someone falling off different levels into the sea, of different seas, different ships, what happens. Talk about previous, and now we can do it currently, people who've fallen off, where they've fallen off. I know people have fallen off goofing around and survived it, but a lot of that's not relevant. We're talking about a specific area of the world with specific currents, with specific heights. That's, if you fall off in the South Pacific or some part of the Indian Ocean with a ship moving at a certain speed, so many variables there, and I'm getting down very granular, but look at that. Let's talk about that. Let's examine that. Put the money forward to look at that. Let's see that. They're so focused on this trafficking thing, which is so vague, and it's such a gray area that doesn't hold any water. So experts on falling off ships, cruise ships, experts on things hitting water, certain weights of certain types of material, of how they, of how quickly a living thing or living person will drown. All of that. Go back and examine the railing, recreate how she could have fallen, and the people who say she didn't, then what happens, because then that's the next thing. After 3:40, her brother goes to bed, and she goes to the balcony on March 24th. She stays there, doors closed because it's windy. You have the balcony door, you have the room, and then you have the room door. And the balcony doors left open, it would make noise, so she wanted to have the door closed so they could sleep. So, because they had plans the next day in Curaçao. This is another thing. The father says specifically in the Netflix documentary, 12 to 14 inches the door was open. Well, did he measure it? How does he know? Did someone measure it? Has that been quantified? Not guessed, quantified. Because in a state of panic, cognitive abilities and measurements are not accurate. And the reason that's important is because that to look at, was it enough for Amy Lynn to squeeze through, put with shoes on, possibly put on clothes, close it because she's not going to leave it open, then go through the front door and go out on the ship, and then that's where problems started. How much was that balcony door open? And was it open? And did anyone else see it and not guessing? Because if it was open, and could someone who's 5'6", 120 some odd pounds, because she's not going to try to squeeze through it. And I say that because she was probably still intoxicated. Well, that needs to be looked at. There needs to be recreations. That needs to be studied. It sounds very light, but these are things as well. And in difference to, even if you lightly close that ship from that time, the door, would it still make a noise? That gets into the two college students, two 18-year-olds who claimed that they saw Yellow and Amy around 5:30 a.m. going up a glass elevator, or 6 a.m. And the mother was questioning them. Chris Fenwick is very likable, bless his heart, has been on different shows. He's the guy in the Netflix documentary who was the videographer, and he said that the ship, which is weird, that the ship security wanted his master tapes, and he told them no. Good for him. That is weird, and that's another reason I leave the 8%. She fell off the ship, but that's weird. Why? He didn't explain why, and then he just makes a comment, well, the FBI will get him or something, which they never did and they had no interest in. Which makes me think as well, I'm just going to throw this caveat in there, that I don't think that, it just sounds like the FBI initially realized they had low jurisdiction, there's not much they could do, they had to make it look good. In 1998 as well, that was when Osama bin Laden in Yemen struck a destroyer going through the Strait of Hormuz or something. That's when the terrorism was getting ramped up prior to 9/11. So I think, I'm going to presume the FBI had a lot of bigger things going on than people falling off ships, and that's why there was, because the investigation they did was really very cursory. It was not in depth, and the two agents were excellent. They're just limited as to what resources and what they can do. And they met the ship out, and remember, they didn't meet the ship in Curaçao, they met it in St. Martin. And you don't board the ship in St. Martin because there's no ports. You take a boat, a skiff out to it, and that's how they get people on and off. St. Martin's the island you see all over YouTube where you see planes that you could literally be like 5 feet from a landing plane because of the topography of the coast, the way it lands. So that's where they came on there, and that's they probably have nothing, very little cruise ship training, or if any investigations on top of other things in the Caribbean, because they were probably, remember, their biggest thing is drug trafficking cartel, and it was really out of control then, still out of control, but that's their number one criminal activity, and they're dealing with that, and that affects every island to a certain degree. So these things that I pointed out that can still be done to look at these theories are very important. And another thing as well, I don't know if that Rhapsody of the Seas is still in service or if there's a similar ship. Time, how long it would take a female to walk from the room she was at to the glass elevators or something similar as well. Because in Chris Fenwick, I'm going to quote, though I disagree with him on what he thinks happened, I really, again, I like the guy. He's very likable and he's a sweetheart trying to help the family. Because I really appreciate that. And he does keep using language and time. And this whole thing is so time dependent in the way to explain it. So how long it would have taken her. Let's say she left at Father sees her at 5:30, 5:38, she leaves. Though again, I have a problem with that, and that just, he falls back asleep, but but between that 20-minute, 30-minute time period, he doesn't hear anything. He doesn't even hear footsteps. That's his daughter. He knows how she sounds. He doesn't hear anything. They're so set on trafficking, he doesn't say, I know what her little feet sounded like, since she was a little girl, and I know the cadence of her feet. But let's say she did that. How long would have it taken her to go there? And remember, she's intoxicated. She's not moving in full speed. See, these little things that really need to be ripped apart could at least, because we have nothing to go on in this case. There is zero. And it looks like there's no fingerprints. I mean, did they even check the railing? Did they check the, I don't know what you would call it. Did they check over the railing, below it, where they could somehow use a rope system, or somehow to get prints there, get something? Maybe it's so sun-baked, but I know that world. That's what I do. There had to be some kind of, even though it was back then, did they even, or did they not even, it sounds like they didn't even bother to see, did they check the doorknobs? Because Brad and her would have been the last people to go through the door. Did they ask Brad, and maybe he was too drunk to remember, when he went into the room, did he hold the door open for Amy? Or did he hand her the door? Was he behind her? And that's important, because if they check for prints and he says, no, I held the door, and then they find her prints are all over the door, maybe that left credence to leaving. If they don't, and if somehow they could check the outside balcony door, because they 3:30 or whatever, they come back to the room, they go to sit outside and chit chat for a little bit. So even if they both open it from the inside, they're outside, they're both outside. Obviously they're not going to, they close it. Who closed it? Did they both close it? Then Brad wants to go to sleep. She has no reason to open that and touch that doorknob until if she wanted to leave it. So, and maybe previously, her hands had been on it, but if they had the technology to see timing of fresh prints versus who they were, all these things to look at that as well. And I'm going to get into the human trafficking thing, which I think is absurd. I'm not discounting the family. But they're in a trafficking expert. I've seen on Court TV they had a trafficking expert who went to some sort of establishment, I think it was in New York City, and rescued a girl. I don't know the details of it, but that's been, why didn't they do that with her? Why didn't they? I mean, that Jazz has been disproven. That has been disproven. That's not her. It looks like her, but it's not her. That's someone else in a different situation in Florida. So that picture is disproven. But the human trafficking thing is so vague. There's no one. There's nothing of any sort of, like, there's an they talk about that there's some kind of organization in Dominican Republic, and because Amy was bisexual, they would have been interested, or some nonsense like that. They're not going to take a Caucasian woman off a ship that goes, I said that previously, they're not going to take an American woman with her family who's upper middle class off a ship either. They're just not going to do that when they're only on a ship for a week, and there's 2,400 people. She wasn't the only 23-year-old on that ship either, and on other ships. So it's not like they were alone. Why hasn't this happened? And why isn't there another person? And I mentioned Natalie Holloway. That was the big thing. She was trafficked, which she never was. Because most Westerners, Americans, Europeans, Australians, go with a group or a family when they're young adults or teenagers. So no one, other than the sightings, there's no trafficking. Like, look in the whole area of the ABC Islands, Trinidad, Tobago, and Venezuela. And then look at every case of someone stolen from a cruise ship and trafficked. Look at their background, and just, there's a lot of work, like tons of work that, and I know there's people out there who could do it, go back decades of cases, if there's anything similar. Because the family's so set on that, and they got screwed over by that Frank Jones guy. I think we've all heard this. For hundreds of thousands, he claims he was going to rescue her, and he needs to rot in prison. The poor family's been taken advantage of. But the trafficking problem, the trafficking thing, Chris Fenwick is so set on that. The abduction. Why are they going to abduct? It's just none of it. It's just nothing. There's no evidence. And I'm going to finish this up with the sightings. And the first sighting we hear is from Carmichael, the computer engineer from Canada, the diver in that remote part of Curaçao, which is now Port of St. Marie or something, where now more people go. And he was diving. He didn't know who she was, and he didn't care. And he's diving. He's the only one who I find remotely credible in the sense he's very intelligent. And he claims he sees a woman who has a Tasmanian devil tattoo, and she has green eyes, says she's Amy, and then a guy who looked like yellow stares him down, and there's another guy, and that's all it is. I would like more of every second he can remember of this interaction, and I know it's a long time ago, every second of this, from her feet to her whole body, if there's anything, because that tattoo thing doesn't tell me anything. That he may say, oh yeah, it could have been something else, and he could have thought, oh yeah, that's what it was. People do that, not to disparage him, but he, in the cab driver to a certain degree. I mean, that the problem with that is, why are they walking around Curaçao? What's there? People do some criminal research of if there's any reason, if she's being abducted, why they would be walking her around, what they're doing, and if they're trying to traffic her, why are they so nasty about everybody? They're giving them a dirty look. And remember, it's a different culture and different people. It's the Caribbean. And maybe they were giving him a nasty look. They might have been giving him a look just because he was diving. He might have been in a wetsuit, or they might have thought it was strange, or they might have thought, here's another tourist in our waters. It could have been it's too vague. Everyone jumps on that, but that's at least, I don't take any of those. I take them all sort of with a grain of salt, but he is the only, we need a lot more from him, a lot, like a complete interrogation. Not that he did anything, but the next, I would put number 2, the cab driver who had, and I'll tell you why, because I'm familiar with that part of the Caribbean, the South Central. He had a name that was either East Indian, Pakistani, or East Asian, and there's a very large population there. So that was definitely his name, and that's probably doesn't stand out to most people, but there in that part of the Caribbean, northern South America, you have a lot of East Asian people who've settled there and been there a long time, a lot of Middle Eastern people too, and they do have cab businesses. So I definitely believe this was his name and who he is, and I don't think he had no reason to lie. He's nothing to gain. He sounds like a very well-meaning guy, and I bet you he had a nice family and a daughter. He's one of these people, one of these guys who wanted to help, which sometimes can be bad too, because people want to just be part of something and remember something in a way that is too much. So this man said that it was some couple months, I can't remember the time frame, but it wasn't long after she went missing, that a woman who looked like Amy, who had, and he said the green eyes thing, came up to his cab looking for a phone. He points to a phone. She starts to go and then goes the other direction, and he's almost sure that was Amy. And I can't remember if he said her name was Amy or not. He may have said that. And the green eyes thing, and that whole thing. Now, there are plenty of Caucasian women with green eyes and tattoos around the late 90s who were in the Caribbean during the summer. And there's also from different parts of the world. That's where I'm going to take this apart. Let me talk about green. I have green eyes. I have light green eyes. And Amy had darker green eyes. Green eyes in general are the rarest in the world, but green eyes in the sun can look like blue eyes. Blue eyes can look like green eyes. And they kind of can go back and forth. And they'll stand out depending on the person. And her green eyes were very dark and stood out. And I say that because I want to also bring down, well, there's not many people with green eyes. Well, that's true. But green eyes are typically almost exclusively Caucasian people who have they're either Icelandic has the most green eyes, a few Scandinavian countries, very small parts of Russia, actually parts of Italy, and some Dutch people. There's Dutch people all over those islands. There's the Dutch St. Martin, the Dutch settled Guyana, the Dutch were in Trinidad. They were, because the Dutch have almost no presence in the Americas as far as North America, but they were in the islands. So this could have been a Dutch woman. This could have been a million things. It could have been something else. And another thing for all these sightings, there could have been something that was come up with. I mean, people are not stupid. They could have thought, well, okay, this could be a scam they've used for decades. Let's see who's missing and say we're that person to try to get benefits from it, try to gain from it, and find someone who looks like her. So I don't think that was Amy Bradley who went up to. And then he tells them to go to Coral Cliffs and Kaduki Hills or something, and said they're both resorts or some sort of vacation areas, but they're not very safe. Don't talk to anyone. Look around. What does that mean? I think due to probably the difference in communication styles, they might have misinterpreted, but that doesn't do anyone any good. The driving around Curaçao, the Tic Tacs, and all that doesn't mean anything. Unfortunately, this poor family has been led on wild goose chases, and I don't blame them. The littlest thing, if they're told there's a sighting of Amy on a raft in the middle of the Indian Ocean near Somalia, they'd probably go there. So it's not there. And you would too if that was your loved one. But ultimately, and then I'm going to go to the third sighting of the sailor who was in the brothel, and I'm also going to defend him. He was a young man. He's a young guy. He's like in his 20s, his late 20s, or I think he's in his 30s. He was close to retirement. He's in a brothel, which he shouldn't have been in Curaçao. He's docked there, and and there was a guy with a 30. So it sounds like probably what was going on that is not mentioned. I'm going to clear this up for everybody. Who cares? It's a brothel. There's probably a drug use, and he was using drugs. I don't want to disparage him, but the brothel thing, the Navy has had and has strict rules about that, but it's not a moral church. But that's against if prostitution's legal in Curaçao, they don't want their soldiers doing that. But rather their sailors. But they're not. If it's legal, it's not a big deal. There was drugs there, probably, most likely. That's why he was so covert about it, and that's why he didn't want to say anything. He was probably maybe did some coke. That was the big thing at the time. Maybe marijuana. Maybe that was it, because that was a big thing. That was illegal. That's why he didn't mention it. And a brothel, the whole combination. But he said a woman said she was Amy. There was a guy with a snub-nosed 38, big deal. A Saturday night special. And all those islands, they'll have junky pistols and revolvers like that. That's nothing. That's some kind of, that's too much Hollywood. That's, especially low-level criminals have junky guns. It's not like if he would have walked in there and they all had AR-15s and RPGs attached, that's different. And that was probably, he may not remember that. That might have been these are prostitutes. And they're saying he doesn't know who this is, and he doesn't care, and he was there to do his business, and most likely do drugs. He seemed like a fine guy, but of course he did, and he's not the only one. There were other guys out. The guys would go out, and he was probably drunk out of his mind. So I discount him completely. I don't discount him because he seems like a great guy. I just don't think the situation isn't valid. What was going on, and he's leaving stuff out unintentionally or intentionally, that not to be malicious, but he did in his defense, he did try to call and talk about he possibly had a sighting. So he means well. The man means well. Please ignore that car alarm going off. So he meant well, but I discount that. And there's the fourth one finally of the lady with her husband in Barbados, one of the ABC islands, who's in the bathroom. A woman approaches her, starts to crowd her, says she's Amy from West Virginia, talks in a low voice. There's two males there. They're very aggressive. They're in the women's bathroom. They want her to get out. She asked about seeing the children. It's way overboard. That I don't discount she had a encounter that was very strange with someone. That wasn't Amy Lynn Bradley. It was just a strange encounter, and that's another thing that needs her, Carmichael, and they'll never find a cab driver unless he came forward. But even then, I would discount that. But those two need to be torn apart. I discount her. It sounds too. There was something else there. And what was this bathroom in Barbados? Barbados is pretty affluent. A lot of these islands just don't have, the really nice islands, they don't have random bathrooms you can use. They will on the beach in nice areas, but it's not the U.S. in that way. Like Trinidad had some closed. They were closed and they were really a mess. Public restrooms in the city of Port of Spain. Georgetown, Guyana, places I've been recently and I walked around, they didn't have any of that. They didn't have a beach though, they had a seawall. There's no beaches there. But they might have had one public restroom, but it wasn't like the US, so I don't know what this restroom, and why are they in a public restroom if they're trafficking? Well, these got to be the dumbest, or they want attention, or this constant interaction with people is so strange. And here's something to think about. If this had any, let's hypothetically say this is true, why are they out interacting with people? And if they don't want to be and they give them dirty looks, why are they don't interact with people? They seem to, these, whatever they are, if they are these trafficker criminals, why are they out and about and they see the public and they see people, but they're getting angry when people acknowledge them and watch them? It just is a very odd, it all doesn't sound right. It doesn't sound the way humans work. And it doesn't make sense. So if you look at this like a math equation, I don't want to bore people here, but I look at this, Amy fell overboard. Well, then, like Chris Fenwick said, no, she didn't, all the sightings, and I've heard that from other. But I just debunked all the sightings because you take each sighting and look at it objectively. There's nothing really there except for Carmichael. The cab driver, I think, was meant well. In Carmichael, I don't mean he saw Amy, but it should still be investigated. What did these people see? Because maybe there's just, and I'll tell you the bottom line of what's going on with these, minus the sailor. What's probably going on is you have a woman with a boyfriend or some domestic situation, and they're encountering that. And I'm not saying a domestic violence situation literally, but maybe with an overprotective boyfriend or something's going on, people are perceiving that is, this is Amy Lynn Bradley. That's what that is. Nobody's picking that apart. Everybody's looking at these off-the-wall things. So there's so much that needs to be done, and I'm pleading with people, anyone, to do these, the science of falling off ships, fingerprinting, setup of ships, the ocean, the waves, the current, the shell thing, do they get busted up, the things get broken, the doors, the balcony door, the front door, the sounds, how long it takes to get to somewhere. That's such a big piece too of how long it takes to get to somewhere. Because I mentioned the 8% in my previous video. I left that door open, which actually I'm dropping down to 6%, that she was killed. Though I still leave it open that someone was trying to have sex with her, she fought, and they killed her. And somehow disposed of the body in the water. Just like Natalie Holloway. That's probably, that would be the only other thing. That's the only two probable things, falling overboard or that. The time is Chris Fenwick to what he said, the videographer. He beautifully says that. Timing. For all those times, how long did it take to get from their room, where Amy was, to get to these places, to go up elevators, to be around Yellow? How long did it take to Yellow to walk? How long? See, this is where the problem is. And this is why what really sells the falling, is that the father gets up at 5:50, Amy's not there, he goes to look for her, thinks she goes to get coffee. And how close was she to the breakfast area, to going for a walk? I mean, I know these ships are big, but the point I'm saying that if she didn't fall like everyone believes and she was abducted, how quickly could have they have gotten her out to where they wanted to be, and that kind of thing. There's just too many holes in this. And I'm going to leave you with this on the Netflix documentary. They did a great job. It's very entertaining. Again, they could have cut the friends out. No one, that was all irrelevant. That doesn't have anything to do with it, or how. But what they could have, the reason, number one, it's so dramatized and they really push certain agendas, and I really commend Netflix for this, even though they did that because they opened this case up to millions of people, and maybe there's something out there that they could find, you know. That there's something out there for people to look at and get interested in. Maybe someone has seen something. So that's the point of it. But the downside was it gets people too worked up, because the trafficking thing's so fascinating. They could have 10 movies on that, but that just is, and that's going to go on and on for a long time, until people really realize there's no trafficking going on in that area of the world. So I wanted to close this, put a bow on it. I pray for the family. I hope there's some closure. I pray for Amy. I pray for everyone to be safe on ships in these circumstances. It's not just ships, cruise ships. I've gone to a lot of, let's say, misunderstood, dangerous places, even though there's beautiful people there. The Congo, Haiti, parts of South America, Guatemala, blah, 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 etc. And I'm going to go to more, and I've been to more. Burundi, Rwanda. But that's one thing. You definitely can get into problems in these places. But when you think you're going to Bahamas, the ABC Islands, Jamaica, Mexico, they could be just as bad, if not worse, because here's the difference. If you're in Haiti or the Congo, your guard is up. If you're in Venezuela, and you're an American, or you're a Westerner, and you don't blend, your guard is up. Your guard is way up. You're not going to you better not be getting drunk and screwing around there. You're probably there for nature or something incredible. But these places, everyone puts their guard down. You can look what's happened to people. I mean, these are crime-free, safe places. Bermuda's had problems. Virgin Islands have had problems. bad things have happened in these places. I'm not saying on a regular basis. I'm saying they will happen, and these are considered super safe. So don't get, people go missing all the time. Just be aware when you go to these. I get chastised a lot for my YouTube channel and what I love and with animals and all that. And I'm not telling people to do it. But one thing is, I'm very self-aware and aware. The head's on a swivel. And you have to be, when you're dealing with a Cayman crocodile in Trinidad, when you're with a gorilla in Rwanda, when you're in Guyana, whatever, you have super venomous snakes, you're in these places. I mean, you have to be aware. But it's just easy to go. I can tell you one of the most dangerous, anxiety-inducing trips I ever went on was recently to the Yukon in Canada, which is a stunningly amazing, beautiful place. I love Alaska, but I think the Yukon's way better because it's more remote, more nature. But it's super remote. I'll tell you why, and I hit it at the wrong time. I hit it late October, and winter had hit. Blizzards had hit. It was cold weather I had never seen in my lifetime. And they have amazing national parks. There's caribou crossings, and you can be killed so easily driving there if you don't know what you're doing. It's not like driving in Buffalo. It's a whole different thing, and there's no services. It's Ice Road Truckers was filmed in these areas, so which is a lot of scripting. But the point is you break down, you get lost in the Northwest Territories, Yukon, in the winter, you're dead because you're gonna freeze. So my point I'm saying, but as far as crime, there's drugs there like anywhere, but they're super, super safe. As far as there's no crime, nobody's doing crime where it's 10 below. People are trying to just survive. It's very safe. It's Canada. But that's more danger. I'd rather be in Haiti than there because of how dangerous cold weather to be. So my point is, and you have to be aware in a different way. You need to be aware. These places can be extremely dangerous when you're around water because people drink. I'm telling you, you buy drugs, you drink, you go to bars, clubs, you swim in currents you don't know, and that's where problems happen, and that's where you get deleted or you come close to it. Because what's worse is you end up in a hospital in a third world country or another country, and your insurance doesn't work, and you have tens of thousands of dollars of bills, and then you have to be medevaced and flown out of there. So you don't want to have, that's another issue. Or you decide to go hiking because the jungle's pretty, and a bushmaster, a fer-de-lance, bites you, which is 1,000 times as venomous as a rattlesnake. They don't have anti-venom like they do in the U.S. for rattlesnakes and water moccasins, and you're dead. Or you're going to be a mess and need a blood transfusion. I'm not trying to scare you. I'm just saying of things to be aware of. It's much different, and I've taken mega risks, but I'm not saying other people should, but I have contingencies and an understanding. So I love everyone. I want everyone to be safe, and I'm going to close this out for Miss Amy, Lynn Bradley, Iva, Ron, Bradley, Chris Fenwick, everyone in the whole family. This is me solving the case, but I wish I could help out. I would even be opening. I know there was talk of coordinates in Venezuela or where Amy could be and all that kind of stuff. But if there was any talk, or rather any evidence, that there's something in these countries, Venezuela, Southern Caribbean, I would go for free. Just get me the visa. Because as an American, we can't go to it's very hard to get a visa. I'll go. I don't want money. I'll go and help you and look. Be more than happy, and I know how these places work. And what I mean is I understand how dangerous they are, but how to if you're there for that, I would be more than happy to look if it helps out. Because these are not places, they're not Curaçao. You just don't drive around looking for stuff. These are different places. but I'll just leave it at that. So I hope everyone has a great month as we go in, as things hopefully cool down. God bless you.